Hi, Amy. Welcome to the third paddle.
Thank you, Jennifer. So glad to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be so awesome. I haven't had a lot of authors on the show yet, so I'm pretty excited to talk to you about your book, Network Beyond Bias. So let's just lead off with what
Sure.
led you to write the book, Network Without Bias.
Yeah. So, I've been doing diversity and inclusion work on kind of a volunteer basis for a long time, and I've always had a passion about this topic, and like back to childhood even. And what I wanted was some book for me, a working professional, to say, okay, I'm all in on this diversity thing, but what can I do about it? I'm not a big corporate executive. I'm not I don't set HR policy. I don't set public policy, but this is important to me. What can I do? What impact can I have? And I kept looking for that book and it didn't exist. And I read a lot of books along the way. And I thought, well, if the book I want doesn't exist, maybe I should be the one to write it. And so I
Absolutely.
did.
Oh, that's great. How long did it take you to write it?
Well, so there are always, in my opinion, there are always three answers to how long did it take to write your book. Okay. So the first answer is my whole life, because everything I have ever learned had to be filtered and packaged into or out of this book, right?
Mhm.
So you take everything you've got up to that point and you pour all of it in there. The second answer is I started a blog at leadatanylevel.com about, let's see, it was June of 2017 when I started my blog. And I was able to repurpose some of that blog content and re-edit it in the book. So from that standpoint, it took about a year. From the time that I actually opened up a Word document called bookdraft.doc, it took me about 4 months. So, but I had a really good coach that helped me go from a blank page to a finished book. So that was great.
Oh, that's awesome. I just appreciate the process. I know that, it's one of my goals to write a book. And I think for a lot of people, they have aspirations. So it's good to hear that it's possible and that you can take your whole life and your blog posts and kind of roll it in there. And then also the coach part. I do think it's
Yeah.
important to have a coach for a book. So why are you so passionate about this work? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but you talked about it as the topic, but there's also the work then
Right.
behind that.
So, there's been a lot of times in my life where I felt different for all kinds of reasons. And I guess the thing that has always stood out to me is I want to show up and I want to do the best I can at work. Right? I want to be the best me I can be. And I want to contribute and solve problems and be respected and have opportunities. And I'm just like everybody else. And so if I want that and I felt different, there's probably a lot of opportunity out there for me to change the way I show up at work so that other people feel welcome and so that I can open up opportunities to other people. And, I remember when I was a kid and, I'd see like the videos, the commercials on TV about like donate to this organization or that organization, right? We only had 3 channels when I was a kid because I'm just that old.
Me too.
And you had to like turn the dial to get it to go like to the other channel, right?
Yeah, I was the remote. Jenny, go
Yeah.
change that channel. Like,
Channel,
go
right?
run over there.
Exactly. It's like if there was a storm, you couldn't get like 2 of them, so you were stuck with whatever. So yeah, so you'd see these commercials, and I never saw these people who were suffering. Like I grew up in like a working class, blue collar kind of area, and I was privileged in many ways, right? I had a home, and I had 2 parents that were my parents that loved me very much, and still do. There were a lot of things about my upbringing that were very privileged, but I wasn't overprivileged like my kids are right now, right? It's like kind of ridiculous, like the stuff that they have that I never could have envisioned. But I never saw these kids that were suffering as like other, right?
Right.
And I just saw them as like, wow, if I had been born there, that would be me. Or if I had been born looking like this, that would be me. And so I always kind of identified with these sort of outsider perspectives. And then, when I went to college, I actually came out in college as bisexual. And that was a really difficult thing growing up in a, like a rural, Southern Indiana. It wasn't, I grew up with very definite ideas about, what homosexuality was and wasn't. And, Like, I don't think I had the word bisexual until I was like 20. So like it was, like it just didn't,
Right.
that wasn't, you just didn't talk about it. And I very acutely felt other for a long time, and I knew why, but I didn't have the words to express it. And then when I had the words to express it, it became an even more acute feeling of otherness. And then when I got my job in IT, I was a young and attractive woman, and I was treated like I was an idiot because I was a young and attractive woman in IT. And I would get these comments from men in my department who'd be like, I did, I quality checked your code, and you're really analytical for a girl. And that was some of the nicer stuff I heard. And I was like, this is awful. Like, who would want to be in this? And I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm young, right? But then I noticed, like, I'm getting older, and that kind of stuff still happens. And I tell a couple stories in the book about that. One guy, telling me, because he saw me reading an econ book, oh, instead of, when they talk about oil and gas, maybe you can think in terms of purses and shoes. And I'm like, I'm in my 40s, and I'm like, what do I have to do to be taken seriously, right? And I look around and I see other people that have that so much worse than I do because of their age or their race or their gender identity or their sexual orientation or, like where they come from or how they talk or what school they did or didn't go to. And it's not that they can't do the work, and it's not that they can't be rock stars. It's that they just either they don't know how to show up in the way that fits like that box, right? Or they're doing everything they can to show up that way and they're still excluded. And I don't want to be a part of that.
Absolutely.
I want them to want to be around me and doing their best.
I would say that what I appreciated about the book were kind of, and we talked about it before we scheduled the interview, were some of the parallels. It's not lost on me that we're a couple of white women talking about inclusion. However, I think that both of us coming from tech also know, at least in one regard, what it is like to be the other. And on last week's show, actually, I talk about a couple of situations that I went through, because even when we talk about communicating with technology professionals, all of the articles that I found were about how women need to change in order to work with the men. And I argue that that's incorrect, that we need more women and people of color working in technology for starters, and that we need to work together to bridge those communication differences. It's not a one-way street. We need to understand what the perspective is of the technology professional, but we need to work together to collaborate so that our projects can be better, and not just make it about the women who need to be thinking about, what was it, purses and shoes? Purses and shoes. Yeah. And it's just, that's just an example of what really needs to start to move. I've read a lot about people of color also having much worse situations in technology workspaces. So it's a huge work that you're doing, and I'm so glad to meet you and know that somebody else is out there passionate about this kind of work.
Thank you. And so, if you think about I interrupt you, but if you think about like from the perspective of people of color, like one of the most insulting things to me from my tech days, and I'm kind of still have a foot in IT in some places too, but is like this, I hate to even say it out loud, but it's this notion of like a server relationship being like master and slave relationship. And I've always been bothered by that terminology. Mm-hmm. And I'm finally starting to see some people say, can we not call it that? And like, thank you. Like, it's just such a simple thing that shows up at work. And just being able to have that conversation about, like, this is not okay to use these kinds of paradigms when you're talking about, you're talking about two servers communicating with each other, right? That's not the right analogy to use.
Yeah, it's just a network connection.
Right.
I mean, or it's like the cables that are male, female. There's all these paradigms that kind of come into all these gender and race paradigms that come into tech that need to stop. I read an article, I posted it on social, about how how Siri and Cortana and Alexa, they're all women here to assist you. Yeah.
But Watson's a man.
Watson is a man, the really smart
Because
computer.
Watson's really smart and he's going to solve your problems, not serve you up the information you asked for, right?
Correct. And these are some of the ways that you can tell there aren't necessarily a lot of women in the room. I also have always argued that Apple didn't have one woman in the room when they named the iPad, but that's a whole other separate issue.
This is true. The
So,
yeah, and just like other ways this shows up in tech is like facial recognition software that doesn't recognize non-white faces, or facial recognition software that advises Asian Americans that they need to open their eyes for the camera, right? Because they didn't take into account that their ratios of recognition were based on a Eurocentric model and not on a more diverse
not on diverse.
user
Yeah.
group, right? And so this is all kinds of like, there's just so much tied up in that. And then when we talk about like artificial intelligence and machine learning and those sorts of things, all of those same biases go into that code too. And it really is kind of a scary thing. Like if you just keep doubling down on the same perspective over and over and over again, you're missing so much in terms of data, in terms of the ability to process information and come to different conclusions.
Absolutely. And I think we'll find our worlds get further and further apart instead of together. And I think that that's really the importance of your book. And I really love the way the book really connects, having new experiences with kind of challenging maybe our default actions and activities. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about how new experiences affect the brain and how that can maybe change or alter our perceptions?
Sure. So your brain is really good at taking shortcuts, right? If it's seen something before, it just kind of slots it into that, been there, done that category. And what happens is, like, if you imagine water running down a hill and it kind of carves a path, and the more water that runs down that hill and that same path, the deeper that groove gets. And then before you know it, that's the only path it will take, right? And our thoughts do the same thing in our brain. Our thought patterns create the same, patterns of synapses, create the same neural pathways over and over and over. We keep reinforcing that. And if we want to jar ourselves out of that behavior, we have to choose to do things different. There's that moment in, what's the Robin Williams movie? Where he stands on the desk and he says, you have to see things from a new perspective.
Oh yeah, Dead Poet Society?
Dead Poet Society, thank you. Yeah. And that's always what I think of when I talk about this, although this is maybe not the best example, but it left an impression. Clearly, I saw that when I was in high school, I think. But if you don't want to keep running those same routines, running those same paths in your brain, like, you have to do something different. You have to choose something different. And so, I talk about this a lot. We grow up with these identities that we build based on how the world interacts with us, how the world responds to us. And the world responds to us based on who it thinks we are, based on how we look or how we act or where we live or whatever. And then, we adopt the values that go with those identities. We start to judge other people based on our identities and values. And we start to choose experiences that fit right into that. And so it just makes our world smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and more isolated, like you were saying. Mm-hmm. And, if we choose some different experience, like, we forget that we're doing this, right? We forget that we have these patterns. And so if we stop and say, yeah, you know what? I always watch football on Sundays. But this Sunday, I'm going to go down to the theater and go to the ballet because it's different for me. And I want to be around people who are different from me or have different identities or whatever it is, right? And the reverse of that is also true. Like, whatever the thing is that you always do, like, I'm a football person, right? Like, switch that and be like a person who can do other things too. And then you start to notice, like, oh, I have a lot in common with the ballet crowd. And, now I'm one of them, and I can kind of see the in-group there too, right? I can see, like, oh, that's my buddy from the ballet. And, hey, I like board games, so I'm going to go ahead to, a board game festival. And now I've got, like, a buddy from the board game club. And, and you can kind of, like, tap into these different interests instead of just getting stuck in one, and go find things that you never knew you liked. And you know what? If you find out you don't like things, that's okay too. but at least you'll have an appreciation for what they are and why they're there.
Absolutely. It always blows my mind that the lack of curiosity around things like that, because I like the ballet and the opera and plays and sports and, and CrossFit and just all kinds of things. And people are like, is there anything you don't like? I'm like, yeah, I don't like bananas. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to like everything, but like going out and having those experiences really helps with like a more well-rounded perspective. And it does bring a lot of different things in. And I think it does add to like bravery. Right. And one of the things that you talk about is how difficult it can be for people to start networking, and so one of the things that really stood out for me was this discussion around knowing your strengths. And so how important is it for people to realize their own strengths when they begin getting out there and networking and meeting new people?
Well, I think it's really important. So the examples that I use around networking are from my own experience of, I want to be helpful. I don't want to waste anybody's time. I don't want to be like schmoozy and salesy. And, that's just not who I am. So I had to come up with a way to network that felt good to me. And so the challenge that I set for myself the first time I went to a conference, which was not that long ago, by the way, it was only a couple of years ago, which I have so many conversations I need to have with former managers about, why didn't you ever send me to a conference? But that aside, I had, I had a goal every morning of, I'm going to find 3 people I can help today. And maybe it's I collate papers for them, or I pass out their handouts, or I recommend a book, or I introduce them to someone. Like, these are things I know I can do, and I'm not going to be nervous doing them. So I need to find a way to go do this and use what I know I can do to go connect other people or to meet other people. And so, for some people, it might be, whatever it is that you have to offer that you do that comes really naturally to you or that's easy for you, right? If you're a writer, or you're a really good listener, you're an introvert and you process things really well. Like, whatever that is, know what that is, know what you want to do, and then find people that you can help you with that skill that maybe they don't have it, or they don't know that they need it, or they need somebody to do it with them. And that way you're kind of coming at it from a place of, 1, authenticity, mm-hmm. and 2, you're giving that person something they can use right then. And, that's how you build trust, and that's how you build relationships. And frankly, that's how you get people to like you, is by being of use. Right?
Absolutely. I just think there's so much beauty in how you can be of service. 3 things you can do for other people every day, and being intentional about that. So you're not just going to the same buddy and helping your buddy, mm-hmm. Helping people in different ways. That's really beautiful. And I do think that it helps you get out there a little bit more. So how vital is networking for your career and your business? We have a lot of business owners listening to the show.
Sure. So from a career perspective, I'll start there. A lot of the larger companies, when they're hiring, they will only post jobs internally, or they'll post internally first. So if you're not already in, your chances of getting a job are pretty low. The next place they look is referrals from existing employees.
Yeah. Do you know anybody?
Right. So who do you know in the company, and even more importantly, like, do they know you? Right. It's not just who you know, but do they know you? And do they know that you're looking, and do they know what you can do so they can recommend you for that job? Because if you don't get the recommendation or the referral, and it's only posted internally for people to like send out, then if they don't know you exist, or they don't know what you're looking for, you're never going to get the message, even if you do know them.
Absolutely.
So if you're looking to move up in a career or move around in a career, it is absolutely essential to let people know what you're up to, find out what they're doing and how you can help, how you can further their goals. If you're a business owner, it's probably a million times more important, because, if you're working for somebody, whether you network or not, as long as you do a good job, you're going to get a paycheck, right? But if you're in business for yourself, at some point you're going to run out of like the 5 people that helped you get started, and then you've got to go meet somebody else to keep that sales pipeline going. And so if you can't branch out from your comfort zone, you're not going to be in business very long, frankly. And,
absolutely.
When you own a business also, like, let's say you're a car salesman or car salesperson, I don't want to gender that, but you sell cars in your area, right? You sell used cars. And let's say you are a white man who sells used cars in your town. And all the people coming to you are white men who want to buy cars. And you don't worry about how to sell to women, and you don't ever talk when a person of color comes in your lot, you don't talk to them because like you're really comfortable just selling to white men. And let's imagine then that like 80% of the car sales people in the area are also white men. So 50% of the population is women. Who are they going to buy their cars from, right? And, like all of the people of color, right? So you're competing for the same market as like everybody else in your space when you're doing that. And then you've got all this uncontested market share that you could go be doing, some really amazing things in if you knew how to build trust in those areas that was real. And so, and that's like just one little example. But if you think about like, okay, well, if I had access to totally different people than the people that I typically sell to, or totally different people from me that need what I'm building in the world, what kind of doors would that open for you? What kind of opportunities could you create? And it's huge. It's unlimited at that point.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more about how important it is for your career and your business. I mean, it is absolutely vital. And I kind of learned that the hard way before I started my business, the importance of really, even when you work in a large organization, you can't make the assumption that people know you do good work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
I was at a conference this weekend with some college students, and I felt so old. But I was sitting at breakfast and we were talking, and one of the young women at the table said something about, how do you network? I study all the time. And I said, okay, you're going to have to find a balance, because here's the thing. I said, so especially for women and for people of color, we feel like we have to constantly prove ourselves. That, it's not good enough to earn a seat at the table. We have to actively demonstrate that we earned it, how we earned it, and why we're the most qualified person to be there all the time.
Absolutely. And that we built the table, we went out, we sawed down the tree and sanded the table down and stained it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that we built the table for someone else, and gosh darn it, aren't we lucky to sit there with them, right?
Absolutely.
And I said, so here's the thing. I said, the problem, the trap that I fell into early in my career, and what I see a lot of young people falling into, is they're working so hard to do a good job and prove that they have the right skills to be there, when their peers are not necessarily doing that, right? Their peers are making sure that they're getting noticed. And I said, so you have to find a balance between doing really good work and getting noticed. Because if all you do is do really, really good work, the people around you are going to notice, and then they're going to use that to their advantage, not to yours. So,
Absolutely.
Carve out a couple of hours a week where you go talk to people in other places and talk about what you're working on. You don't have to be boastful. You don't have to brag about it, but talk about a problem that you solved that you're excited about, or something that, you're working on right now that you're looking forward to, building. Talk about a deal that you've closed. Talk about, what you learned in class last week, like something that where you're actually talking about you and your experience so that other people can see you. And I could tell she was really uncomfortable with that. But I said, you'll get your first job out of college because of a career fair or, employers coming on site. But pretty much everything that happens after that is because of who knows you.
Absolutely. And I think that that's important. The important thing is not just that you go networking. It's also, and I loved the beauty of this in the book, of the champ network. So you diversify in multiple ways. So what's a champ network, and why is it important for us to build this kind of diverse network around us?
So the concept of the champ network is pretty simple. It's the five types of people that you choose for your professional network. So it's not your boss, it's not your CEO, right? It's the people that you actually choose to spend time with. And no matter where you are in your career, no matter where you sit in a company, we all can have these five types of people in our network. But it's important to choose them wisely. And so I talk about the champ network as a measure of depth of your network. And the acronym CHAMP, each letter in the word stands for a type of contact. So C is your customer or your constituent. H is someone you've hired or helped get a job. And it has to be active helping, like endorsing them for PowerPoint on LinkedIn does not count. And A is an associate, which is basically a peer, somebody that you would, somebody you'd go have coffee with, or maybe a drink after work if you're having a rough day, like that kind of person, right? And M is a mentor, and P is a protege. And if you have those 5, I call them the 5 critical connections for your career. And if you have all 5 of those, you're going to be more innovative. You're going to go farther in your career more quickly, and you're going to have the right support network in doing so. And so, as you're building that out, though, you also want those perspectives to be as different from your own as possible. What I find when I speak at conferences is, like there will be an academic conference, or there will be, an insurance conference, or whatever the industry is. And they all get together and they try to solve their problems, right? Like, we have a problem in academia, X, Y, and Z. And they're all looking at each other and trying to figure out how to solve the problem, not realizing that this problem's already been solved in, like pharma maybe, or, the tech sector, or publishing, or, some other industry, right? But they don't have those other perspectives at the table. Like, they're just looking at each other. And if everybody all knows the same stuff, well, then everybody also doesn't know all that other stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, and what I appreciate about it too is like building that diverse network and not focusing on one thing. Something I've run across again and again is how women in particular focus on finding mentors as opposed to having this balanced network of people that they collaborate with. And that focus solely on finding a mentor, it puts you in it kind of, if all you're looking for are mentors, then it's actually not a diverse network.
Right.
You
we spend a lot of time, and I'm gonna speak just for a second to just the white women, right? We tend to look for mentors and sponsors a lot, but we don't stop to think about the places where we have privilege that others don't. And so that's why I have the hire or help in there. Mm-hmm. That's sponsorship, not mentorship. That's helping somebody move forward in their career with a real job.
Right.
And, I think we tend to ignore that we have a lot of power there too. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it feels like we're always fighting our fight, right? But we don't realize that there's so many other people that have been fighting so much harder for so much longer, or just as long, just as hard, right? And it's not a competition, but there are places where you have a foot in the door that someone else doesn't. And so we can really, if we can all just focus on getting past our own comfort zone, bringing in people who are different, and then just like pushing people forward, right? Introducing them in circles where we have connections, building this out where, we're cross-pollinating, our tech friends with our business friends, and we're cross-pollinating, the people from our, our women's support network with the people from our tech support network, right? Even if the women aren't in tech, or, if the tech folks aren't women, like, that's okay. But just getting that cross-pollination going so that everybody's not in their own silos, because that's where innovation is going to happen. And that's where we're really going to build some goodwill if we can, create opportunities for people that, we like, when you don't owe somebody something, you're just doing it because it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Like, that builds huge amounts of trust.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Coalition build in that way, like, we all move forward, not just one group of us.
No, I totally agree with that. Thank you. Yes. Mm-hmm. How do you evaluate how diverse your network is?
Sure. So I explain this in the book, and it's more than I want to go into in the podcast, but I'll give you a little teaser, and then, but the way I do this is I lay it out in a grid, and one component of the grid is network like a champ. And that's the 5 critical connections for your career that we spoke about. And then the other dimension is, what perspectives does your network ignore? Mm-hmm. And that takes you step by step through different demographics, industry being one of them, where you can assess, are each of these people in my champ network like me or not like me? in each of these different dimensions. And then most people feel pretty good going into this. I love this aha moment that I have when I sit down with somebody and I'll draw it on a napkin because, the people love it when you draw a concept on a napkin. And because Indy's a tech city. I don't know if you know that, but Indy's a big tech city. So if I have a copy of somebody, I'm like, okay, let me get a napkin. I'll draw this for you. And then the eyes light up. And so I draw it on a napkin. They're usually feeling pretty good about it. And then as we get into some of the more difficult topics, because diversity and inclusion can be difficult to talk about. As we get into some of the more, controversial top parts of that spectrum, right, you can see their confidence kind of waning a little bit. And then at the end, like, they think, well, one of two things. Either I've got a lot of work to do because I realize I really don't connect with people who are that different from me, right? That's one response I get a lot. The second is, well, yeah, I know all these people who are different, but they aren't the first 5 I thought of. And so then I say, right. And so, like, when your CEO or your manager or your director is making a decision about who they're going to put on a high profile project or who they're going to promote or who they're going to send out on a big sales call, like, they've got these 5 people in mind that they're rotating through too. And they're not thinking of the people that are different from them. And so, like, if you're complaining about, well, I don't get any opportunity because I'm different, but then you can totally see in that moment how you're perpetuating that as well. And I've even had diversity professionals say to me, well, I know all of those people, but they just weren't the ones I thought of. And so to me, that's just, we all have these blind spots. We all have these defaults. And if we're not aware of them, we cannot address them. And so this, the book and the framework really help you just be aware. And it's not a one size fits all. There's no right number for everybody. But, it's based on, like, when you look at it, how do you feel about it? And if it's not good, what are you going to change?
Well, and I think it all just builds on itself, right? If you're having new experiences and you realize your strengths, you're more likely to get out there. And then I think that what I hear you saying is the importance of pausing. Like, you have your default, then pause and think beyond that.
Exactly.
Because we're always going to have the default, which is typically people who are like us. Exactly. So it's about going to that next level, which actually leads me to the last question, which is, whether it's more women and people of color in executive roles or industries like technology, how do you think we can begin to shift what the workforce looks like so it better reflects the world around us?
So, I would imagine that if most of today's executives evaluated the diversity of their networks, if they sat down and talked about, okay, who are their champs, what perspectives do their networks ignore, there'd probably be a lot of ignored perspectives. What I want to do is I want to focus on the next generation of leaders. Mm-hmm. The next generation of leaders are not as entrenched in the way things are as the current generation of leaders, right? So yes. Tomorrow's leaders aren't giving up anything they already have to make room for somebody else. And I want to change that mindset of I have to give something up for someone else to have it. What I want people to understand is when you bring someone else in, you create more for everybody.
Absolutely.
And so I want people to understand that this all starts with their network. It all starts with who they know, who they bring in, who they're champions for, how they connect, how they relate, who they see as like them in quotation marks. Because when you see somebody and you think, oh, they're like me, you go out of your way to help them. And we're all alike in some way, right? Like, there's always something. Like, maybe you root for the same baseball team, or, maybe you both have like the same favorite sushi roll at a restaurant. You don't know until you start talking, but you're going to find something in common with them that excites you. And then you can figure out, oh, like, I want this person along with me because, they're fun. And like, yeah, we have this one thing in common, but they have like the other 99 things that they know, I have no clue about. And I would love to learn more about that. And if I can put my 99 things with their 99 things, now we've got 198 things plus this other one. So 199, right? Instead of the same shared 100. And, and then if everybody's doing that, I can hear my voice, like how I'm like talking louder and get all excited. But if we can get everybody to recognize, hey, I need to connect with more people who aren't like me, even if it makes me a little bit uncomfortable at first, I'm willing to make those mistakes. I'm willing to say, hey, I'm sorry, I blew it. I didn't use the right words. Or, I came at this a little, I feel a little awkward right now. but I really do want to get to know you and you're valuable to me. That to me is how we're going to change this going forward, because we're going to build these leaders. We're going to bring these people up with us. They're going to bring us up as they rise. And then we're all going to get there together, and we're going to be all stronger for it along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more about the need to shift away from I have to give something up for somebody else. It's not like, it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't. It
and
doesn't.
and
There's
we
so much
and
to
we
create.
yeah, and we inherently know that. Like, when we bring on people who are like us, we don't think, oh, I'm giving something up right now. Like, so why does it work that way if it's somebody new or different? The world doesn't work that way. And I appreciate that you're doing so much to help bring that change and help us all raise our awareness. Do you have anything to offer our listeners?
Sure. Well, actually, I've got a very tangible offer for your listeners, and I'll give you the link in the show notes. But I've got an ebook that I'm offering. It's 21 Insights for Inclusive Networking, and you can get it, just by entering your email and the link that I'll give you, Jennifer. And a little secret: if you actually download the ebook, you'll also get a kind of a special gift in a couple days. So.
Awesome. Yes, that'll totally be in the show notes. And please go out there and reach out, and also pick up the book Network Beyond Bias, because it's awesome. And we really just skimmed the surface. There's so much good stuff in there. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here. Thank you so much.